many are here in the Zoom, even more of you are on the Facebook Live, and even more of you are accessing this by podcast now. And so wherever you are in the world, welcome, welcome. Just a few words about a few campaigns before we jump into the learning together. Firstly, we have gone full force into our DC statehood campaign to argue both pro-democracy and for racial justice, to be working towards statehood in DC, that there should be full representation for all citizens. Secondly, join our Fight for 15 campaign for the minimum wage to be raised to 15. We're working closely with Reverend Dr. William Barber II on this economic justice issue. You can see our recent interview with him to learn more about the Fight for 15. And lastly, for now, we're always down here at the border working with asylum seekers for their legal support, their medical support, their supplies, their dignity. We just led a protest yesterday outside of ICE, and we need all the support and partnership we can get. So many more things happening. Hope you'll continue to plug in to our work here. It's a great delight to welcome my dear friend and Rebbe and partner, who was a co-founder of Oiled Tzedek from the start, building the movement, and is just an incredibly dynamic community leader, synagogue rabbi, and teacher at Skokie Valley Agudath Jacob Synagogue, and a national leader, and has done a lot in building refugee partnerships up in Chicago among homeless outreach and other projects. Really a model Orthodox rabbi, social justice leader. And we've got a great opportunity to learn with him today. We only have 55 minutes together, some chance to learn the sources, some chance to ask him questions and to engage in dialogue. We will also be monitoring the Facebook Live if folks want to put questions or thoughts over there. Welcome, Rabbi Ari Hart. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's really an honor to be here, and an honor to be with Rav Shmuley and with Eddie, who I've been following and aware of your work, and I don't think we've ever spoken before, so it's great to be online with you as well, and I hope to get to meet you in person soon. As I mentioned right when I jumped on, unfortunately, one of those
Rabbi Ari, I think we're having some connection issues here.
Oh, we lost him.
Early. Oh, am I okay?
No, do you think you can move to a place where a little bit better connection?
Oh dear. Here, how about this? Is this better? It was on. Can you hear me now?
We can. It's just a little bit disconnecty. It keeps glitching.
All right, I will try. As I was trying to say, I'm outside of a hospital. I had to visit a congregant who was hospitalized, and just the timing is what it was. But can you hear me better now, Eddie? Great. And there's something appropriate about sitting outside on a bench for this call, because I can remember early days with Rav Shmuley, the Oiled Tzedek movement, sitting outside in Rav Shmuley, if you remember this, in a park in Washington, D.C., like negotiating boycotts of agro-processors behind a bush. I think there was a birthday cake somewhere also. So something to being outside and just doing the work wherever you are, making it work, finding ways to make it work, feels very much in the spirit of Oiled Tzedek and this movement. So we're going to talk a little bit today about refugees, Bechol, but also focusing on the Rohingya community, very specifically, in some work that's happening here locally in Chicago and work around the world and around the country that everyone can get involved in. Eddie, would you mind sharing the screen with the sources? Could we do that? Great. So Eddie's going to pull up the sources, and we'll just spend a few minutes looking at these together. Okay. So, stranger love. The Torah contains a mitzvah that, as we see in the Babylonian Talmud, Bava Metzia, is actually the most repeated mitzvah in the entire Torah. And normally when I ask people, if I'm speaking, especially to a group of Orthodox Jews, I'll say, what's the mitzvah that appears the most times in the Torah? People will say, oh, it's probably Shabbat. That's a big important mitzvah. That probably appears the most times. Or they'll say, oh, it's probably keeping kosher. That's a very important mitzvah. Those are very beautiful, important mitzvot. And they do appear multiple times. Shabbat appears multiple times. Different forms of keeping kosher appear multiple times. But those mitzvot are completely eclipsed by the number of times that the mitzvah we're talking about today appears in the Torah. That's the mitzvah to love the stranger, and that appears 36 times. 36 times. There's even an opinion it appears 46 times. So dozens of times in the Torah we have the mitzvah to love the stranger. Kashrut maybe appears 4 times. Shabbat maybe 6 or 7 times. I have to get those exact amounts, but they're both less than 10. Loving the stranger 36 times. It's such a motif of the Torah. It's not just a mitzvah. It's not just a one rule that's given out of 613. It is a motif. It's a theme that recurs over and over and over and over again. We just celebrated Pesach, and the whole point of Pesach is that we go through this journey of being strangers, and then we're redeemed, and then we're redeemed in order that we should remember what it was like to be a stranger and to redeem and love and protect strangers that we find in our midst in the future. It's really a foundational piece of the whole Torah. Not only were our ancestors refugees in Egypt, all of our patriarchs and matriarchs, except one, were in some way immigrants and refugees. Abraham leaves his land. He goes to a land where he's a stranger. Jacob, of course, has to leave. He has to go to Egypt. Joseph is sold into bondage. He's trafficked, human trafficking into Egypt as a slave. The matriarchs, Rachel, Rebecca, Sarah, all journey from one land to another, all experience the loneliness and the fear and the vulnerability of the stranger. So the stranger is baked into our spiritual DNA. And that's why 36 times the Bible tells us to love the stranger. And sometimes people want to say, oh, well, that only means the convert. It's not true. It's not true. If you scroll down, Eddie, you'll see that when we define what it means, this ger, v'ahavtem et hager, to love the stranger, go down a little more. It says our father was a stranger. And if you look in Genesis 19, we see that they were describing Lot as a stranger. They want to oppress him. They want to violate him and hurt him because he's different. And we see that Abraham, when he's trying to purchase and get a foothold in the land, he's told, hey, by the way, you're going to be a stranger in a strange land in the future. So they're all strangers. And if you go down to Exodus 22:20, when it tells us that we should not oppress the stranger, Rashi's very clear on what the ger is. Rashi's very clear. It's so obvious in the Torah what it is, and Rashi gives us the obvious answer. What is a ger? A ger is someone who was not born in that land, but rather comes from some other land to live there. A ger is an immigrant. A ger is a refugee. A ger is not exclusively a convert, though a convert certainly applies. A convert is someone who came from a different culture, a different area, and comes into the Jewish people. But that's a case of the ger. That is not the full definition of the ger. The Torah is so explicitly clear. The Rishonim are explicitly clear. The ger is a stranger. It's a foreigner. It's an immigrant. It's a refugee. It's a migrant. That's what we're talking about here. And that's what the Torah 36 times more than any other mitzvah tells us. It is a foundational mitzvah in the Torah. And this is in contrast with cultures at the time, right? In contrast with Egypt, a lot of the Torah is really meant to set up a distinction between how the Jewish people are supposed to live and how the Egyptians live. There's a lot of mitzvot, a lot of practices that are really about distinguishing and improving or doing differently than what we saw in Egypt. And if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see this very fascinating article about Egypt's attitude towards strangers. The attitude towards strangers was one of oppression. Those are a picture of royal shoes. Okay, those are royal shoes, and on the royal shoes were depicted strangers. They were. You could see, if you look carefully, you see drawings of people with dark skin, right? People who are from the southern parts of Africa who came up to Africa, and on those shoes, those people were depicted because the pharaoh, the ruler, was literally meant to step on them, to crush them. What do you do with a stranger? You step on the stranger. You destroy the stranger. That's like what a good king does in the Egyptian ideology. The stranger represents uncertainty and chaos, and the king represents order and purity, and you got to crush and step on the stranger. And the Torah comes in to say the exact opposite. right? The exact opposite, that we are to love the stranger. In fact, this quote from Rav Samson Raphael Hirsch, so beautiful. Rav Samson Raphael Hirsch, 19th century neo-Orthodox rabbi, very pious, very religious man. He writes as follows, and this is worth reading out loud. The great oft repeated in the Torah basic law is laid down, that it is not race, not descent, nor birth or country or property, altogether nothing external due to chance, but simply and purely the inner spiritual and moral worth of a human being, which gives him all the rights of a man and a citizen. This basic principle is further ensured against neglect by the additional motive, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. So two very important things. One is we all have these human rights, right? We all have human rights. Every human being has inner moral and spiritual worth, and your birthplace doesn't define that. Your citizenship doesn't define that. It's your inner spiritual worth that defines that we all share. And two, not only that, but we Jews, we have a special sensitivity to that because we were strangers in the land of Egypt. We know that oppression. We know it. Our patriarchs and matriarchs knew it. Our ancestors in Egypt knew it. And of course, also our historical ancestors knew it. My grandmother was a refugee from Nazi Germany. My great-grandmother, her mother fled from pogroms in Europe, right? We have these stories. We know the soul of the stranger. We know what it means to be vulnerable. We know what it means to be in a situation where you're oppressed for who you are. We know what it means to be stateless. We know what it means to run. We know what it means to be victims of genocide. That's in our soul. That's our soul knowledge. So here, continues Reb Hirsch, it says, simply and absolutely, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. Your whole misfortune in Egypt was that you were foreigners, aliens there, right? The reason why things were so bad in Mitzrayim is because we were foreign, because we were aliens. As such, according to the views of the nations, you had no right to be there, had no claim to rights of settlement, home, or property, right? You had no legal right. That's what Paro would have said. Paro said, hey, they don't have a legal right to be here. We let them in here. We can do whatever we want with them. Accordingly, you had no equal rights and appeal against unfair or unjust treatment. As aliens, you were without any rights in Egypt. Out of that grew all your slavery and wretchedness. Therefore beware, so runs the warning, from making rights in your own state conditional on anything other than on that simple humanity which every human being as such bears within him. This is so beautiful. With any limitation of these human rights, the gate is open to the whole horror of Egyptian mishandling of human beings. And I don't think I need to, I think we can all draw this is so relevant. I mean, he was writing this almost 200 years ago, but it's so relevant today. And so relevant in our current political climate and how we talk about, aliens and immigrants and what language we use and how voices want to dehumanize and threaten and take away and jail children in cages, right? It all stems from this teaching that we have to recognize that people are people, that people have dignity and rights because they're human beings, not because of the papers in which they're, which they hold or don't hold. So that's the biblical prophetic mitzvah, the command, the clear call that we all have to heed as Jews. Now, it does get a little more complicated, right? Because we have, as in Judaism in general, we have these biblical ideals, these prophetic ideals, and then we have to put them into practice. And I think it's really interesting. If you scroll down a little bit, the concept of the ger, the stranger, shifts in rabbinic thinking. It shifts from any migrant, any immigrant, any person who's moving from one place to another, to a very specific kind of person who's moving. It shifts to the person who's converting to Judaism. And the mitzvah, the prophetic call on a halachic basis, on a legal basis, gets narrowed to the responsibilities of the community to those who've converted into it. And on the one hand, this can feel a little disappointing, right? Why weren't the sages of the Talmud, what happened to this kind of lofty vision, this lofty humanitarian vision, when they were codifying this into law? Why did they only limit it to the convert into the community? Why didn't they talk about, hey, any person who's coming into your land, who's a stranger, no matter what religion they are, you need to protect them, you need to love them and care for them. And I think this is actually a very kind of, there's a very, I don't want to say realpolitik, but there's just a responsible answer. Jews themselves were a vulnerable stranger community in the lands they found themselves. And it would have been perhaps unsafe or impossible for them to be embracing every person of every culture who kind of migrated through their community at the time. They were victims of much persecution themselves. They weren't strong. They didn't have rights themselves. They didn't have safe, communities themselves. So there was a kind of a closing in somewhat of their circle of responsibility to those who were different. And while it's sad to me that that was what happened, it also makes sense that the responsibilities would be limited somewhat to those who were really within their borders. So what Chazal do is they take this very broad spiritual teaching of loving those who are, who are strangers in any form, and saying, okay, we're going to concretize this into those who have come into our community as strangers, and we're going to really work hard to make sure we fulfill this obligation to those people. Now we find ourselves in a different position. We find ourselves in a position, if we keep scrolling down, where we as Jews are no longer, super vulnerable minority populations in the lands we live. Yes, we are vulnerable. Yes, there's horrific acts of anti-Semitism and terrorism directed at us still. Horrible numbers of hate crimes and, of course, shootings and things like that. And it's awful. But at the same time, we have rights. Every major place we find ourselves, where it's America or Israel or in Europe, right? We have rights, we have protection, we have safety, we have strength, we have power. So I think the question now we have to ask ourselves is, now that we're in this new position of power, we're not in that exile mode that the sages of the Talmud were in, where they had to limit the amount of loving the stranger to just those who would convert into the community. Now we have to think about how we expand that circle. Now that we have power and safety and protection, and we have a state, how do we expand back to that biblical, prophetic mode of loving the stranger in its broadest, most universal forms? That's, I think, our challenge today. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit in terms of the Rohingya community. There is no perhaps greater stranger, there is no greater ger in the world today than the Rohingya community. This is a people from a province in Myanmar called the Rakhine province, and they've lived there for hundreds of years. And always with some and religions, altogether. But over the last 2 decades or so, just a consistent escalation in persecution and violence, leading up to what many are calling today a genocide. It's looked like chasing people away from villages. It's looked like murders. It's looked like crackdowns. It's looked like rape. All the kind of the characteristic things that you see when you have one population trying to destroy another are happening to the Rohingya population in Burma. And it's very tragic and almost ironic. It's really, unfortunately, we think of, religion and religious conflict. I think a narrative that many have is that, in the Jewish community, many think of Muslims as violent and, causing all these horrible things. And maybe we think of Buddhists as very peaceful and peace-loving. And actually in Myanmar, it's the opposite. It's actually a Buddhist fanaticism, and Buddhist supremacists are leading in many ways the persecution and violence against Rohingya simple people, farmers, fishermen, just people who want to have families and just live their lives. And it's been horrific, and it's caused a worldwide dispersal of Rohingya communities all over the world. Refugee camps in Bangladesh, people moving all across South Asia, different communities there, and ultimately to the United States. And a couple of years ago, when I just first moved to Chicago, actually, we can, if you want to stop the screen share, Eddie, now we can stop the screen share for a little bit. So I moved to Chicago in 2017, and I was driving around in my car, just going somewhere, maybe to a hospital, I don't know. And I heard on NPR, I heard someone talking about the Rohingya community here in Chicago. And I heard there was a local Congresswoman, Jan Schakowsky, who was involved with them and helping to raise awareness about what was going on. And I had no idea that there were Rohingya here in Chicago. I knew about the problem a little bit, but I had no idea that there was a community here. And I called the Congresswoman's office and I said, hey, I'm a rabbi and I heard about what's going on. And this is really, it's an issue that I've been upset about, but I didn't know there was something local that I could participate in. And she said, oh, let me connect you. And I got connected with what happens to be the second largest Rohingya population in North America, right here in Chicago. And it's so crazy because it is literally blocks away from the Jewish community. If you know anything about Chicago, you might know a street called Devon. Devon is like the Jewish lifeblood of a neighborhood called West Rogers Park, all the kosher restaurants and Sfarim stores and everything. Devon is a central street. And if you've ever been to Chicago, you may know a restaurant called Tel Aviv Pizza, which is just on Devon in California. The Rohingya Culture Center is catty corner to Tel Aviv Kosher Pizza. It's about 30 yards away. So it's right there, right next to all the Jewish communal infrastructure. And what's sad is that there was no connection, no relation, this between the two communities. You have a population, maybe 600 Rohingya families. I don't know how many thousands of Jewish families, and they're all right there on top of each other. And we share so much. We actually share so much. I was able to visit the center and met the founder, Nasir Zakaria, a tremendously inspiring man. He came here when he was 12 in the early 2000s. He learned English washing dishes at a casino and went on to found this center, which plays a critical need in the lives of the hundreds of Rohingya refugees who are here based in Chicago. Everything from ESL classes to helping people. A big part of what they do is just helping people figure out how to live in America, how to navigate the bureaucracies. These are mostly illiterate people. Rohingya culture, the Rohingya language is not a written language. These are people who were farmers in subtropical Asia, farmers and fishermen, and now they're here in Chicago trying to navigate, the refugee system and how to try to find jobs and get their kids in schools and build a future for themselves in Chicago weather in a very urban, different environment than they're used to. So you can imagine some of the challenges that come up. And the center's doing a tremendous, tremendous work in helping that community just survive and thrive. And we had him to the synagogue. We had him right before Pesach 3 years ago. And he shared his story about his story of coming here. Shared some very, sorry, there's an ambulance. Hold on one moment. I'm going to mute it 1 second. Oh, Nasir is here. Hold on. I'm so thrilled. And Nasir, I apologize. I don't know how long you've been here. Again, apologies if people came late. I had to visit someone at the hospital. I wasn't able to get back to the computer at times, so I'm doing this from my phone outside the hospital. But Nasir Zakaria, the founder of the Rohingya Culture Center, I invited him. I wasn't sure he could come. He's here with us today. And I think it's so important we hear from Nasir because he's amazing and the center's amazing. Nasir, I was just telling the story about how you came to the synagogue and how you told us about what's happening. Maybe I want to give it over to you a little bit to talk about what's happening now and what you're up to. I think it's so important that people hear from you. So Nasir, take it away.
Hello, everyone. Firstly, I would like to thank you so much, Rabbi. You are amazing person to connection with me, and thank you so much. So the Rohingya community arrived in Chicago 2012. So we're living in Devon area. So we saw so many community here and also Jewish community too. So it's very similar, the cases, Jewish community and Rohingya community. So sometimes I don't know how to connection with Jewish community. So I find out Rabbi come to our center, they visit, and they ask me, what do you need? How we can help? This is amazing. He's come to us and he make us friendship. I think I'm glad to connection with Jewish community because the Rohingya community is really, really need help for around the world. So it's similar as genocide going on in Rohingya people, similar like Jewish community was declared as Nazi. And we own country, they keep out, they killing us, they're raping us, everything, And now when we out of country, other country, living refugee camp, is also they try to kill us. The burning came again last 2 weeks ago. It's 45,000. The camps is burning down. 400 people is die, children, older people, women, in refugee camp in Bangladesh. So you can see how bad the politician, they try to kill us. In Burmese government, mostly they are Buddhism, they say they are peace. But uh, we, I mean, we never fight any people, anyone, a government. You know, we are very simple. We living in Burma without education. We like we living like jail. We can Rohingya people, they are not allowed to go city to city and home to home, like, you know, village to village. They are not allowed to live there. But still we are happy, we are people, so we farmer, fishing, that kind of job the Rohingya people is did. Still, we never fight, we never say anything about the government. But the Rohingya people, we don't have the language, we don't have writing, only language, because the Burmese government forced to us uneducated. So that's why we are here today is genocide. They forced many decade years, they forced to us, they denied education, they took away citizenship, and they took our land, they killed our mothers, grandfathers, you know, brothers, sisters, mom, dad. So this is happening, ongoing genocide. Now is military coup is again in bad condition in Burma. So also the people is suffering like same similar us now. So how the Jewish community speak up with for about genocide of Rohingya? We really need help to someone speak up for us, because almost many decades, 10 years, no solution, no protection come to the Rohingya people. They live in plastic shelter. You know, the plastic shelter they live in, the children no future. You know, children is grow up and human trafficking going on. So this is happening. So I hope the Jewish community stand with us about Rohingya ongoing genocide. And we also, as a non-profit organization, we help in our community because the community need help because of education. Zero education and everything need help face to face, the paperwork, and we help them paperwork. We make appointment for doctors and citizenship class, ESL class, and you know, we can say like this is for Rohingya home. Everything, if they have any problem, they come to RCC. And also, we are, uh, I mean, a non-profit organization as a, we need also help other people, help us to help in these people. That is, I would like to say thank you so much again, Rabbi. You are amazing to give us connection with your beautiful community here nearby us.
Thank you, Nasir. It's such an honor to have you here with us. And I just want to highlight something Nasir was sharing about, which is the horrific fire that happened in the camp in Bangladesh. So as we've been talking about, the Rohingya are dispersed really across the globe, from the east to the west. And one of the places that many Rohingya refugees are is in Bangladesh. And there was just a few weeks ago, a massive fire, which many believe was caused by arson, by people who don't want them there. And this was a camp that held 50,000 people, and vast swaths of it were burned. Many people died, and much was lost. Homes, businesses, all kinds of things were lost. And this is just an example of one of the many hardships that Rohingya people are facing now. Where they go, they're often treated very badly, and all they want to do is just live and be safe, and those options are very difficult for them. Which brings us back to what we were talking about earlier, which is the mitzvah, the command to love the stranger. We as Jews have this sacred responsibility to do what we can to provide love. And love doesn't mean feelings, right? In the Bible, love doesn't mean just to feel something. Love is an action. Love means to give. And so when we talk about loving the stranger, we don't mean just feeling a feeling of love or feeling a feeling of sympathy, but rather taking concrete action. And I want to share a few actions with you that we're trying to work on, that we're following the Rohingya community's lead on. Sorry, I went away for 1 second. Actually, you know what, Eddie, in that source sheet at the bottom, there's 2 links. And if you maybe want to pop those into the chat, there's 2 petitions, 2 very important petitions that people can sign. And one of those petitions is petitioning the US government to formally declare what's happening to the Rohingya a genocide. So formally declared a genocide. This is a very big deal. It hasn't happened yet formally, although informally it has. Even in the Trump administration, Secretary Pompeo did call it a genocide. And that was a promising step. But we are asking the Biden administration to formally declare it a genocide. And maybe Nasir, can you say a little bit what that would mean? Why is that important?
So it's important is the most United Nations as a recognizes genocide. So this powerful country in United States, they are not recognized yet. They say ethnic cleansing. So they recognize it's ethnic cleansing. It's not. So the signed petition, we say it must be United States of America. They have to recognize of genocide, because around the world, the country waiting for this country, United States, if they say on ongoing genocide. So it's many countries come together, take action and take responsibility. So we make signed petition because of this is important for us, because it's happening is, they took land, the killing, burning, it is genocide. So, and that's why we make signed petition. And second thing is we make signed petition is for about the senior citizenship in our community in Chicago, because the Rohingya community in the whole life, they never hold. They don't know how to read, how to write, and also especially we don't have any writing. So it's so difficult to learn English. But most 60 years old, 65 years old senior is hoping when they get citizen, they would like to go meet their children. They would like to go meet their parents. The people hoping when I get citizen, so I would like to meet the families. But unfortunately, many 2-3 seniors already passed away. Before they pass, they say, "Oh, this is time. I would like to go to with my family." But unfortunately, they pass away because the feeling, "Oh, I don't know how to read, how to write, how I can take citizenship." So that's why I'm thinking the government, United States of America, to understanding about issue of Rohingya is different than other Rohingya refugee. Like many countries, refugees, they have own writing, reading. So our refugee is only speaking, no writing. So this is happen. I'm worried about the community. Many stress is coming in. So that's why we also make signed petition about citizenship.
That's right. And in that petition, there's also a request to have the doctor's notes, right?
Yes.
And this it's going to sound like a small thing, but it's actually a big thing. You know, when you have someone who's trying to get refugee status in America, there are certain things that we take for granted, like literacy, like knowing
how a doctor's office works, like all these things which we as citizens of Western society just know and understand intuitively almost, but if you're not from this world, are so foreign and difficult. And one of the petitions, the second petition, is about that. Nasir, can you say a little more about the doctor's note petition? And Eddie, maybe you could pop that in as well.
So doctor knows is the trauma, trauma, psychiatry specialist doctor. Sometimes when doctor note, doctor say this person, they know, they can read, they can write, they need translate, Rohingya translate. So that is doctor, mean doctor check up everything, the physical doctor, you know, the doctor said this is trauma, and you know how to say, like trauma is stress, and you know they never learn English, they never go to school. So then doctor give them note when they submit the application, when apply for citizen. So it's immigration is denied. Oh no, you have to learn English, you have to speak English. So even the translate is not allowed. So that is I'm so concerned about that senior people. Again, the trauma, stress is come again. So probably they will, older people, probably their heart fail, is going to be die. So that is going to situation of our community. So we apply for translator. I mean, you know, the older people, they never, if you teach many years, they don't understand because they never, we don't have any writing. That's why. So, and I hope our Congresswoman John Chikowski, they will talk about issue uh, in the Rohingya community. They feel about education. So it's important for, I mean, I'm worried about the people going to be heart fail, is going to be die.
That's right. And not only are we asking Jen Schakowsky, who's our local congresswoman here, but we have people on this call from all over the country. I see Oscar Cohen is here. I know Oscar is in New York. I know our Arizona Jews for Justice friends are in Arizona. I know we have people watching on Facebook from, I'm sure, all over. And what each and every one of you can do is fill out this petition and then do two things. Call your state senator, so call your senator and your House of Representatives person and tell them to do these two things, that we want the Rohingya genocide to be formally declared a genocide, and that we want this exemption to be given to senior Rohingya people who have been victims of unspeakable traumas, unspeakable horrors, to be allowed to get a doctor's note that they can then not have to do some of the literacy requirements and be able to be eligible for citizenship in America. Again, these are elderly people. These are people who've been through things you can't even imagine, who are old and sick, and we just want them to be able to be here with their families in peace and not have to worry about deportation. So it's so important that, you know, all of that our elected leaders hear about these issues. And it sounds like a small thing, you know, oh, just let them get a doctor's note so they can bypass some of the language requirements. But again, it can make all the difference in the world to, you know, a Rohingya grandfather, so he can stay in this country and be with his grandchildren and not be deported to who knows where and to face who knows what. Because as we've talked about, the Rohingya community across the globe is very vulnerable. So that's something each and every one of you can do. Each and every one of you can do. While Nasir is here, I'm not going to make him fundraise for himself, but I do want to encourage you, if you do give tzedakah, and give it to refugee groups or immigrant groups. The Rohingya Culture Center is a fantastic resource. I've been there many times and can speak to their amazing work in so many areas of need. Everything from food. Ramadan is about to begin. Nasir, how many meals are you going to give away over the course of Ramadan?
Yeah, we mostly the mail is 200, 300 package every day. We try to planning to give them. So not only Rohingya community, the neighborhood people, the everyone, Muslim, non-Muslim,
Yeah.
they can join with us to the food.
because of their reputation and because of their good work, the Rohingya Culture Centers become a site of food distribution for the whole neighborhood, right? So it's beautiful that the Rohingya, a community that has so many needs and challenges, is also giving back beyond just the Rohingya cult community to all those in need in the neighborhood. It's a really amazing thing, and that's a credit to your leadership and Sarah, who's I think online as well, and Laura, who is with the RCC, and many great staff people and volunteers who make the RCC work. Nasir, or is there, or I don't know if Sarah's on, is there anything else that we should know about what's happening today and how we can get involved?
Yeah, you can come here. I mean, her speaker is problem, so she will come to me here. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having us today. Rabbi Ari, I'm so happy we were able to make it. I've been watching on the other computer that doesn't have a camera, so I'm around, but silent. But yeah, RCC has been doing so much to help the community, Rohingya and non-Rohingya. So I really appreciate you pointing that out. It's really important to us to help our neighbors.
Beautiful. So if you want to learn more about the Rohingya Culture Center in Chicago, you can visit that website. And if you wish to donate some of your tzedakah dollars to an incredibly worthy cause, I recommend it personally. It's a place where I like to give. And just to tie back, and maybe we'll do some Q&A now, but just to bring it all full circle, the Bible is the Torah is so adamant, so insistent over and over again, 36 times, 46 times, that we have to love the ger. We have to do things. And there's no greater Rebbe than Reb Shmuley and Reb Eddie in terms of living this every day. And you should get to know about their work on the border and in so many other areas, actualizing this mitzvah. But the Rohingya globally is a powerful epitome of what it means to be vulnerable and what it means to strive for better life and what it means to be seeking safe haven. And we as Jews can be a part of that story. We can be a part of their safety and their protection and their flourishing. And then they're ultimately giving back, because just as we learned what it means to be ger and then we've given back, so too are the Rohingya. They know that experience, and now look, they're already giving back. So this is part of the cycle of humanity, that people are oppressed and then other people love them and care for them, and then they go on to then give back to others. So we can all be a part of that amazing, beautiful human cycle. And I'm just so grateful to know Nasir and to know the RCC and to be invited into their work in these ways, because it's been so incredibly meaningful for me and my community here. And it's an honor to share it with each and every one of you. And I encourage everyone to take a step to remember that love is not just a feeling, love is action. And sign a petition, make a call to a legislator, make a donation, learn more about what's happening in the Rohingya community, learn about the fires that happened. There's a New York Times article from a few weeks ago. Learn, get educated, talk about it, find out if there's a Rohingya community near you. Milwaukee, Wisconsin has a large Rohingya community. There are others in America. Get involved and make a difference, because that's what the Torah is all about. So with that, I want to pause here and open it up for questions or
Amazing, amazing. Thanks so much, Rabbi Ari, and to friends who joined, partners who joined from the RCC. Yeah, we want to open up the floor for questions from friends, whether you're on Facebook or you're over here in the Zoom.
Awesome. We have a couple of questions that have already been flowing in, Rabbi Ari, and thank you, Nasir, and all the folks there who jumped on the call for us. It really means a lot for us. Rabbi Ari, why do you think that the mitzvah and the commandment of how to treat a stranger is more than 30 times? Why is that?
What's going on? How are you?
Why is it more than 36 times? Because it's the story of the Torah. It's the story of the Torah, just like the story of the stranger in a strange land appears multiple times, right? And we have this in the Torah. Stories repeat, and they repeat because they're important, and they're important, and they repeat to tell us that they're important, to teach us they're important. So the fact that the Torah says 36 times, love the stranger, it's an intentional repetition to drill it into our heads, because it's really important, and also because it's so easy to forget. It's so easy to not love the stranger, right? Because to love the stranger, you have to go out of your way. You have to interact with someone who's very different. You have to expose yourself to, scary and sad things. it's very easy and comfortable to not love the stranger. And I think the Torah reminds us over and over again, because it's a spiritual hurdle we all have to overcome. And even of myself, like, it's very easy to just get, not in a bad way, like, oh, I hate strangers, I don't love them, but just like, I'm busy and I've got my kids and, life, and it's hard to, sometimes it's just easy to forget about, people who are on the margins. And the Torah is like just hammering in our heads, don't do that, don't forget, love the stranger, love the stranger. Yeah, it's a good question.
Rabbi Ari, I have a question. So, part of the fear of refugees emerges from hate and dehumanization, right? That's historical. But part is just natural, right? We have an American life here, and the idea of people who come from a different value system coming here, it can naturally feel like the American culture will be distorted or perverted in some way. How do people who don't have the type of hatred from dehumanization, but have sort of a natural sense that a natural sense of fear of just masses of refugees arriving in America who will change America? How do you address that phenomenon?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the story of America, right? I mean, whether it was the Italians, at the turn of the century, or the Jews, or, every group that's migrated here, there's always been a wave of backlash, and they're going to change everything. But, unlike, France or England, in many ways, it's great. That's what America's all about. It's all about people who came to the shore, who were different, who were fleeing something, and who wanted to live their life in a protected and safe way. So it's kind of an absurd argument when you really think about the history of America. Like, I get it a little bit more if you're from France, but even there, of course, it's absurd. But like in America, that's just the American dream. It's the American story. And Nasir will tell you, I mean, what do Rohingya people want? What's the vision? What's the hope that Rohingya families want? They want schools, they want jobs, right? What is it? What does the Rohingya want?
So mostly I have 3 daughters. So I need my kids better future, because in my life I never get the future when like today my children, they can go to a school. It's hope future they will doctor, engineer, lawyer. So in Rohingya community around the world right now, I can say around the world, is people go there saving life. It's difficult other country. So this country is value for as a people of human being. I mean, value is children, future, everything. So I mean, the community only hoping our future is our children, better life.
That's right.
That is number one for us, because many Rohingya people in own country never get a school. I mean, I lost without my life is without education. Almost 40 or 55 or 40 years now.
Yes.
That is goal is.
And isn't that the American dream? I mean, it just reminds me of my own family. My grandmother, she was born here, but her mother, my great grandmother, lived in Eastern Europe. She came to America by herself. The rest of her family was murdered in Eastern Europe before the war by Cossacks in the 1920s. And she came here illiterate, couldn't read or write. All she knew how to do was farm. She worked on a farm. She had a very hard life. She raised her daughter, who got some education, who then raised my dad, who became a doctor. And that's the American dream. And that's, we shared that. We have so much in common. Nasir, we're just, 3 generations ahead of you. But in 3 generations, Rohingya will be, it'll just be you'll be like the Jewish community, and there'll be another group that comes in. That's America. That's my vision of America, at least. That's the American dream. So yeah, that's how it answers for me. Great question. Other
Okay,
question.
friends, time for one more question.
Yeah, we have a question in the chat. Rev Ari, maybe you can chime into this. How do we talk to our Jewish community about advocating for refugees when some might believe that this isn't a Jewish issue?
Well, you gotta tell them there's no more Jewish issue. There is no more Jewish issue. There's no more Torah issue, and it could not be more Jewish, because it's so rooted in our sacred scriptures. And we saw that, and we could have spent 16 hours looking at sources for loving the stranger in our text. I mean, what I showed you now is just the briefest overview possible. There's so much Torah about loving the stranger. And it's so profound in our own histories, right? We who knows better than the Jewish people about what it means to be a stranger and to be vulnerable, to be victims of genocide, and to have to flee and run. So that's such a powerful combination, the spiritual and the historical, the personal, all that intersection of all those things. There just could not be a greater Jewish call than to support those who are going through what we did spiritually. What
Sorry,
are
Ari, looks like we
we have
lost
to
you
be
for a
people.
second.
The problem isn't in the texts. Oh, sorry. The problem is not in our texts or in our tradition, in our history. The problem is in what Shmuley was talking about, getting people over that hump, getting people to understand, this is not an existential threat to America, to our communities, getting people to understand and to identify what we went through with what people are going through today, and to see the parallels there. And then to understand that when you have those parallels and when you have that sacred tradition, you have to act.
Amazing, amazing. Friends, thank you so much for joining us from one of the great educators and activists of our time, Rabbi Ari Hart, and to learn about this crucial issue. Thank you, Nasir, and those from your team doing wonderful work over there. Thank you for all who are tapping in around the world to join us for this learning. Please join us in our fight for 15 minimum wage. Join us for our DC statehood campaign. Join us down here at the border. Fly down here, come visit us, come work with us to work with asylum seekers down here. And please join this wonderful Rohingya Cultural Center work. Rabbi Hart, thank you.
Sign the petition and call your federal representatives, call your senators and your congresspeople. Tell them you want to see the Rohingya genocide recognized as such, and tell them you want this exemption given to senior Rohingya people that they can stay in this country. Very important. Your voices will make a difference. This is not an issue where many people call about. So every call that legislators get about this makes a difference, because they say, oh, people are learning about this. People care about this. Okay. It really makes an impact. Please do it. Please do it.
Amazing. Amazing. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Oscar Cohen, great to see you, Oscar. Miss you.